Welcome to Well Played Podcast, a show on all things playful and joyous in education. I'm your host, MrMatera, sixth grade teacher, author, presenter, and today we have a special guest, a first-time appearance here by Stephen Issacs, and he and I are going to be chatting about creating authentic learning opportunities that kind of go above and beyond the sort of normal scope that, happens. But before we kind of dive into that, before we get into this episode 115, I want Stephen to introduce himself a bit.
Sure thing. Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to work this out. My name is Steve Issacs. I teach game design and development at a middle school in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. I created and been teaching this game design program for it's got to be over 10 years now. And next year, I'm excited that I'll also be bringing my course to the high school. So I'll be teaching a couple periods of the day at our high school to extend the opportunity for game design to the high school kids, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time because they have this opportunity in middle school and then come back to visit and always tell me, oh, but there's no more opportunities for game design. So now there will be. And in addition, I've been involved in research in virtual reality in the classroom for the last 4 years, doing some neat projects with kids creating content in VR, and I've been also really involved in esports for the last couple of years, creating opportunities for kids to get involved in all aspects of competitive gaming.
That's awesome. You've always sort of been ahead of the trend there, because 10 years ago, creating a game design course, that was not on most people's radar.
True.
And esports is definitely on the rise, and lots of people know about it now. But again, I would venture to assume you were sort of ahead of that curve as well.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been involved in gaming, in all aspects of gaming, like my whole life, I guess. So it's been sort of a natural thing to kind of stumble upon the ideas of game-based learning and incorporate that. And then, as I started kind of following esports, like you say, early on, it was, I knew it was where we needed to go with kids. And now people are really listening.
Yeah, huge. I mean, huge. I don't know the exact number on it, but it's
huge.
It's a huge moneymaker. I mean, I heard a couple colleges actually give out esport scholarships.
Yeah, and that once I saw that was when I knew we had, a real opportunity to sort of infiltrate, because, when you start, that's an easy selling point, right? When we start telling boards of ed and parents that there are scholarships involved, then, that perks everybody's ears up. So I think that was really fantastic when colleges got on, involved in that level. And it makes perfect sense because you look at the League of Legends finals and the viewership for that, albeit worldwide, is at this point greater than the number of people that watch the NBA finals, the World Series, final game. And this year, I think it even exceeded the numbers of the Super Bowl, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. I did not know that stat.
Yep.
That's crazy. So, talking about this, I love this topic, creating authentic learning opportunities that kind of go above and beyond. Obviously, we can do that using some of the technology that we have, but we can also use that. We can also create that, it doesn't have to be high tech. It can be high tech, low tech.
Right.
It's really, I guess if we were to sum it up, what are some of the things that help create that authentic learning opportunity?
So for me, a number of years ago, I started, employing the idea of passion projects, or 20% time in my classes. Sure. And that's when I started to see that, when, it sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but when kids are given opportunities to learn something that they're excited about, they go far with it. And one of the most amazing things that happened that really kind of clued me into this idea that we can create opportunities. So for one thing is with a passion project, that's one of the areas where I learned I don't have to be the expert to give kids an opportunity to learn what's interesting to them. So one of my students, I teach Game Maker Studio to my kids, and Game Maker Studio has a drag and drop interface, which is great for creating games. It still follows like the programming type of syntax, but it's it's kind of easy to navigate because it's drag and drop. So that's the level that's kind of appropriate for the bulk of my kids. Well, behind that, there's a full programming language called Game Maker language. So one of my students, this kid Brian, about 4 years ago, in fact, he was an 8th grader then. He's a senior now. He, for his passion project, he got like so immersed in learning this programming language that, I mean, far beyond anything that I could do in that language. And what was really interesting is, a lot of people knew that I use Game Maker a lot in my teaching. So Pact Publishing, which is a publishing company, approached me to write a book on this language, this Game Maker language. And my initial response was going to be, I'm sorry, I'm not equipped to do that. And then I thought about it a little, and I reached back out to them and I said, listen, I'm not in a position to write that book, but I have a student who's an 8th grader who's gotten so into this language that I'm certain that with just a little bit of guidance from me, and maybe I would, work with him and edit it, that he was the one who could write this book. And fortunately, they were open to that. So this kid in 8th grade started writing a book that in the middle of his freshman year, I didn't have him any longer, but I was still working with him on the book. His book was published, and I joke about how this kid was 14 years old when his first book was published. I think I was 48, co-publishing, co-authoring this with him.
Is that so? I'm looking at it here on Amazon. Is that Brian?
Yep, Brian Crispin.
Wow, that's a crazy behind the scenes story there. I didn't know either on that book.
Yeah. So it's really awesome, and so like I say, that got me to thinking like, where can I create these opportunities? Like, I can facilitate that. We talk about it a lot, right? We talk about the sage on the stage or the guide on the side kind of thing. I like to think that I really take that as far as you can, in that, I have some kids that want to learn things like Unity. And last year I had met this guy, Ruben, who was a Unity developer that, I met him at a games and education event in Washington, D.C., and he was interested in working with kids or supporting education, but, he was a developer. And, I jumped on that opportunity and asked if he would mentor a few of my students. So he was willing to do that. So again, here I am, like, I'm not teaching these kids Unity. Some of my kids would go ahead and learn it on their own, but then when you could bring, this mentor opportunity and, it expands what's possible. So they've been working with him and, so I left last year. That was, so they were 8th graders also, and they left me, and I kind of left with this thought, like, these kids, there's so much more we could do with Unity. And then this year I was approached by a company called Zennial Digital, and they wanted to work with students to develop virtual reality content with their developers, and, utilizing both student input and actually give students a chance to actually work on the development. So, I reached back out to these 3 kids who are now in high school, and now we've started working with that company. And the kids we have meetings with this, VR development company. The kids are part of all that. They have access to all their Unity files. And now we're at this point where they're trying to, sort of see where they can sort of modify and build on, what's already there. And then we're going to continue next year. So, these are the kinds of things that I think, with a little bit of facilitation on our part, granted, I'm involved to a point, but, I can put a lot of this responsibility in the kids' hands once we get up and running. And then, they're doing things that are going to put them in positions that, for all I know, they'll come out of high school ready to be, hired, as virtual reality developers, or what have you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty tall order. What would you say to like somebody that's starting out, right? Like, so you're just take an archetype of a teacher, you're a new teacher, you've been teaching, I don't know, 10 years, whatever. And you've been doing kind of the normal thing, you've been doing the textbook and the cadence of a normal unit, teach a few lessons, give a few little assignments, and then all of a sudden you either have your project or test.
Right.
Wow, like where would you start? I mean,
Yeah.
you're so far down the path. Hearing that story, it's
Right.
amazing, but no one's going to be like, I'm going to start working with app developers tomorrow.
I mean, I'd like to think one thing I've noticed from all this. Now, granted, as you are as well, as you start developing these relationships, whether it be on Twitter or online, you start to meet people and what I found is there are many, many, many people out there that are very invested in in our future and the idea of what's possible in education. I think knowing that like in other words, me finding a company, most companies that you approach, not most, but there are certainly plenty out there that would be very interested in working with kids or have some, members of their professional industry that are, I think we can start to, I mean, each of these examples I'm giving, these were like something that was happening, one special circumstance at a time. It wasn't like I had every student engaged in one of these projects. So
What and they sort of bubbled up to the surface. You didn't sit at home on a Saturday and said, "I'm going to start working with Unity and doing Unity development." Like the right place, right time. You
a,
know,
a lot of
both.
that. Yeah, you're right, because the book one was they were looking to me to write something, and I was able to, engage a student in that. And then the other one, I happened to meet, this developer who was willing. But I think we have, gosh, so often I meet people that would be willing to work with kids, in some capacity, whether it be like mentor opportunities are great because they don't necessarily involve a whole lot of time on the part of the mentor, but I think it allows some of these people in industry to give back a little and to feel like they're supporting something that's
Yeah.
happening, you know?
So, like on a smaller scale, much smaller scale, at
Yeah.
my school, the seventh grade history teacher does, I think, kind of what you're saying, and so many people are willing to sort of donate their time and talents. He does like a Shark Tank.
Yeah.
He does he calls it a toy company project.
Hmm.
The kids literally have to do like market research. They go down and interview kids from like our lower school, see what they would like. They then actually try to create the product a little bit, and then they go back for market testing and see if like the kids
Yeah.
would like more stuff. And then eventually they have to like write up the proposal, do all this stuff, and the teacher gets these industry sort of leaders from parents who have jobs
Right.
in these industries sitting there as the panel, as the sharks.
It's
But I mean,
great.
kicking off the whole thing with creating experiences that kind of go above and beyond. Like
Yeah.
kids aren't going to forget the Shark Tank experience.
Right.
Where they may have forgot if he just chose to lecture on market research, lecture on like business plan, and gave them a test on that.
Yeah.
Like
And kids like that pitching to real adults, versus their peers, that's awesome, which kind of makes me think too of like things, like I love for kids to have opportunities to get out there and present. One of my students last year was one of these kids where it's funny because the sense was he wasn't doing all that much in a lot of his other classes, and for some reason I mean, kids like games and stuff, right? So he really took to game design, and he started with what was his like mini game project and in Minecraft, and then just was so into this mini game that he extended it and became his full, end up his final project. And he ended up, it was funny, not funny, it was just great. He came out, one of the things I do is I produce Mind Fair, which is a big Minecraft convention, and he was able to come out with, so I'm in New Jersey, but he and his mom came out to LA, and he presented at our LA show on two different stages. He had kids do, an activity in our learning lab where they went through his game and gave feedback, and he did a presentation on our inspiration stage. So here he is in front of this huge audience. And then at our New Jersey show, he and his partner came and spent the whole weekend showcasing in our independent game zone area. So, again, this is like, and that was a kind of easy win, right? Because I actually had the ability to to invite him, easily without having to go out to outside people beyond that. But again, another experience, and presenting in front of real people. My daughter is involved with a lot of what we do with Mindfair. And, and I, it's funny. I'm not like, I see her in school and I see how so many of these experiences are not so authentic. And I see what it's like for a kid to prepare for and give a presentation, even just to her peers in class. And then I see her get on a stage in front of hundreds of people and own that stage and do that and do these other things related to this big event that we plan. Like, she's involved with, we have a group of YouTubers at our events that are called the YouTube Rising Stars. So we have our highly influential YouTubers that do all these big meet and greets and signings. And then we have a group of about 10 or 15 rising stars at all our events. And, my daughter's become the one who's responsible for interviewing them and checking their application and vetting them for the event and working with them at the event. So again, it's like, this happens to be my daughter, but this is a real world experience that she can have, which is, I think teaching her a lot more than she gets out of most, experiences in school.
Yeah. So, that makes me think, that jumps to, in my mind, you're talking about truly authentic, real world situations that are not being conjured up or fake. This isn't like, let's pretend we're putting on a conference. Let's pretend we have this. That's fantastic. Now I'm curious, obviously that authenticity piece, the higher up we can get on that, the better. And we know that. Would you suggest and encourage people that if they...
Hold on one sec. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Hello. Hi. We were just talking about you. This is my daughter. She just walked in, but
Hello.
Hello.
So would you suggest, if you can't produce that authentic moment, in your opinion, in your experience, is the next tier still powerful?
Sure. So, yes, definitely. So, but there's no reason why it can't be somewhat on that authentic level. Like in my class, for the kids who are not necessarily going out and presenting or writing a book or whatever, they are writing blog posts as their reflection on their design process for a game, right? So they're still, writing for an authentic audience in that case. But, and I try to treat my class as a game design studio environment. And I think the kids get a lot of that, but you're right. They're not, and the goal, I do like for them to get to a point where they publish their game in some way that I can share it publicly. But yes, the idea is there is some of that. You're not going to, I think these opportunities are available. So I think, yes, we can find them. And I think, yes, we can create as, authentic experiences, even with what we have. Like I say, the whole idea of having student work be public facing when we can is really great. We do have concerns there, of course, with, what kids can share publicly, information and things. So we have to be cautious about all of those things. But yeah, to answer your question, let's make things authentic as we can. And I do think simulating that is better than not trying. I'd still rather, like, I remember when I was a kid and we played the stock market game in one of my social studies classes. At the time that we were playing, I wasn't, investing real money, but I was very invested in the outcome of this game because the simulation was well designed, So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just curious, because people all out there want to probably bring the best experiences they can. And my sort of follow-up question to you on it is, do you think one leads to the other? Do you think by maybe getting out of the normal test kind of pattern, moving towards a simulation or a game or something with levels of authenticity?
Yeah.
Does that lead to the bigger?
Sure. That brings me back to that stock market example. When I was in that class and we were learning about how one of the things that it kind of taught me, which I really appreciated, was that, as consumers of products, we're also pretty have a good pulse on what might be good investments, right? So at the time, I was, it always goes back to games. Coleco was coming out with ColecoVision. Are you
Oh
old
yeah.
enough?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I was following that throughout this project we were doing, this stock market project. So I then decided I wanted to invest whatever real money I had in Coleco. My grandmother, who I shared my thoughts on it, invested. My mom invested, and we all did quite well investing in Coleco, which came right out of this school project. So yeah,
Wow.
by all means, right? But that must have felt for me truly relevant, that I realized that this is what investing in stocks is like. So let me do this. So I give a lot of credit to I think it was Mr. Dennison for creating an authentic feeling experience for sure.
Yeah, and I can't in my head picture little Steve. Like I can't picture in my head you doing that if the unit was kind of the normal, like we're just studying the definitions and we're like
Right.
gonna take a test on that.
I
So
don't think so either.
yeah, so I mean like clearly I think when you do these things that are authentic, even in a simulated situation,
Hmm.
it connects to us as a human. Like you
Absolutely.
internalize it that much greater.
Yeah.
And I would argue too in simulations, or if you're really able to do the real thing, it calls upon so many other skills. So it's
Right.
not just the singularity of do you know these definitions and can you answer my test. You all of a sudden, like your daughter or the author, your co-author of that book. I mean, the amount of skills they have to pick up just to now do that thing, to write
Right.
that book, to work with all those YouTubers and organize the
Yeah.
event, like the communication skills, the organizational skills, the time management skills, on
Right.
top of the actual task of in that
Yeah.
making the game or
Yeah. And those, so those are the big wins, right? Like I have a handful of those truly over the top experiences like that were that real, right? So, the majority is going to be how we structure our regular, class environment. And I know with what you do as well, I think that's what we're trying to do, right? Is make it as relevant to kids as we can, and when we could push them even outside of the classroom walls, all the better. But I think we can give them great experiences, and that's what takes creativity on our part, right? Like there's one teacher in my building who I just love the stuff he does. He does a CSI crime scene unit in his science
nice.
class to do forensic science, and the kids get so into it. Right now, they're not out in they're not down the street collecting blood samples, from the, but they're getting a pretty neat, authentic, simulated experience for sure.
Yeah, and I mean I think what I love about this episode, and I hope people are gathering from it, is you know even if even if you don't achieve like the fully 100% authentic outside, we can reimagine what a classroom looks like. We can
Totally.
reimagine what a unit looks like. And probably what we cannot imagine is all the places that'll take us.
Right.
Right? Like you may end up on a stage in California, or your student may end up authoring a
Right.
book based on it. We can't possibly fathom all the outcomes, but
Right.
we need to begin to reimagine it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oof.
and we know that, right? And we see like the difference between the kind of stagnant, traditional classroom environment and not. And and I mean, I think we owe it to our kids to make, it really comes down to making it meaningful, right?
Yeah, the sort of the tagline to the school that I work at is an experience for a lifetime. And I don't know why, and I don't know if it sounds cheesy or not, but like in my head when I got my job there 11 years ago and started working there, and I'm a history teacher, so we do lots of simulations. But when I say lots, I mean like two or three, compared to maybe an English class that doesn't usually do simulations as much.
Right.
But the reality is, like, I kept noodling on that idea and experience of a lifetime. Like,
So
what are they
great.
gonna remember? They always, every time, on every survey, on every kid that comes back, they always talk about the simulations. So over the years, it's like, how much more can I think of another one? Can I squeeze in another one here? And I loved your language too about public facing. So even if I teach sixth grade, we can't get buses, we can't go places all the time. Like, I can't always go out, and I teach world ancient civs. Like, there isn't a whole ton that you can like connect with your local world and do with that. But I can create these simulations in the classroom. I can invite guests into the
Yeah.
classroom. We
And
can
gosh,
use
the technology we have, I mean, I started getting super excited when I realized how easy it is to bring a professional game developer into the class via Skype, right? And again, it goes back to so many of these people that are just incredible are willing to give you 20 minutes and yeah, that's something, pretty special for our kids.
total game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I can't believe it. I'm so glad that you were on the show, but we are
It's,
already at reflection time.
all right, let's reflect.
So I've pulled a quote that I think fits. It's from Sanford Wheel, Sanford
Okay.
Wheel, I think is how you pronounce it. And I think it really fits. So here we go. I think we are a product of all our experiences.
Absolutely. So geez, which is interesting, right? So I guess in the spirit of reflection, if I'm doing this right,
Yeah.
um, it sounds to me like the potentially sad part of that is when our experiences don't stimulate us and provide a thriving opportunity versus, of course, the hopeful side, which is as we provide authentic experiences, we're building, some great attributes in our students and hopefully, creating memorable moments that, like I think back, people ask me, how I got into what I'm doing with game design. And it's funny because for a long time I kind of forgot. And then I finally remembered that in high school, in my computer programming class, our teacher let us choose, imagine this, what we wanted to do for our final project. And, go figure, I created an adventure game that I put so much more time into than I would anything else, right?
Yep.
So that was one incredibly meaningful experience. And then I talked earlier about that stock market game. I mean, there are several experiences that both not only not only did they have a huge impact, but when I think, like, here I am so embedded in game-based learning, and all of these allowed for that. So very, very, very appropriate. And I think it gives us the task of having to create experiences that are gonna contribute.
Yeah, so for me, I think that's a solid answer. And for me, if I was to reflect on this, I think we are the product of all of our experiences. I like the idea. We always say, we're trying to help our students prepare for the future. And then somebody always reminds us we have no idea what the future is. Especially when I teach sixth grade. I teach 11-year-olds. Like, I have no
Yeah,
idea what the world's going to be like when they're 25.
right.
Um, but if I play with these words a little bit, I think we are the product of all of our experiences. So I'm going to use the word product as not like a finished thing, not as like,
Mhm.
here's the end product. I'm going to use it as like addition, like the sum of, right? So I think the greater the experiences we can give, the greater the person becomes, the greater that product becomes, right? If we're adding 1 plus 1, it's only 2, but if we're adding 10 plus 10, that's 20.
Yeah.
So can we have more 10s in our classrooms? Can we like give those mega experiences that sum product gets bigger?
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Good food for thought for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope we can have you back on. This was
Sure.
great.
Love to. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're both Steve and I are both going to be at ISTE. This is
Yep.
the week before ISTE, so if you're listening to this, tweet us, meet up with us.
Yep.
Usually there's some sort of couple game experiences at ISTE, so check those out. You'll probably see us in the playgrounds and the Bloggers Cafe and all around. We're both friendly guys, so just stop by and say hi.
Yes.
And everyone, have a great day and play on.
Yes. Thanks, Mike.
No problem.